Hi guys, and welcome to our tutorial on how to build haunted house caliber pillars for your haunt or for your front yard. My wife and I both have over a decade of experience building sets for haunted houses, and we use this knowledge to make these pillars for our front yard. This is quite a messy project, so I'd strongly advise using a plastic drop cloth. Paint, stucco, and styrofoam will get everywhere. We picked up 3 10-foot by 20-foot 1mm plastic drop cloths to cover the walls and floors of our garage. Here's a bottom view of the pillar's wooden structure. We use 2x3s instead of 2x4s to save a little money and weight. When we build more, we'll probably use 1x2s to shave off even more weight, as the 2x3s are even a little overkill. I planned out the cuts to get 12x12 on the external measurements, and then used 3.5-inch drywall screws to put it together. With the skeleton together, I used 7/16 OSB for the outside. This is for the styrofoam to have something to glue to and to screw into. I don't know if I'd use anything thinner, as this is the real strength of the pillars. For the backside, I put less screws, as it will be taken on and off for any internal electrical work or placing weights for stability. Here they are in the garage. They're 7 feet tall, 12 inches wide, and 12 inches deep. I wasn't filming when I built them, so if you have any specific questions on their construction, please leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer them. Here we've got the polystyrene we used. I just call it styrofoam throughout this. In the past, we've always found it without the vapor barriers on it, but all we could find for this project were sheets with the film on it. You'll want to peel the film off from both sides, if this is the kind that you got. You'll see later we only peeled off the shiny side. I really wish we would have peeled off the other side so the glue would have adhered to the foam itself instead of the plastic film. Measure out the pieces you'll need. A Sharpie works well to mark on the styrofoam, but after repeated use it will start to fade quickly. A utility knife with a razor blade works well to cut them. Be sure to have extras for larger projects, as the styrofoam really dulls the razor pretty quickly, and it's always best to use sharp tools. You don't need to cut all the way through the styrofoam, as it will easily snap along the cut, and we don't need a perfect cut either, as this will be burned and covered with stucco later. With your pieces cut out, we'll be attaching them to the plywood with liquid nails and drywall screws with washers. The liquid nails is what really adheres the styrofoam to the plywood. The screws and washers are there for extra support and to keep it in place while the glue dries. Liquid nails is flammable, so be sure your project is fully dry before you pull out the torch. Here you saw that we had the clear vapor barrier still on the back of our styrofoam. Didn't ruin anything, but it adhered the vapor barrier to the plywood, and later we saw that some of the vapor barrier was pulling away from the styrofoam. This might be an issue after a few seasons outside, it might not. Here you want to sink the washers just barely under the surface of the styrofoam. Too deep and it'll just snap off the piece of the foam. Not deep enough and you'll see it on your finished product. You'll see later that we cover up the holes with stucco. When you're putting them in, go slow and make sure they don't sink too deep. If your drill bit is jumping out of the screw a lot, either apply more pressure or get a new number 2 Phillips bit, as they can get rounded out over time on the end. Don't worry if your bit jumps out of the screw and you put a hole in the foam. We'll be able to fix that later. Here you can see we have our 2-inch foam on the bottom and 1-inch foam on the top. We didn't put any foam on the back side of the pillars, as we'll need to open them up to secure them to the ground later and put weights inside of them to make them more stable. Also notice that we had the front pieces of the foam overlap the side pieces, so that when we have to go hide the seams, they're on the side, not the front. Here Gail is marking the lines that we'll carve out to imitate the mortar in between bricks. We went with 7-inch by 4-inch bricks, since the front was 14 inches wide, and that would make the most sense for 2 full bricks. Offset the lines like any normal stone or brick structure. We're shooting for this to look as real as possible. On that note, also bringing the bricks around the side, like you'd see on a real pillar. Later we'll use the stucco to mask the seam in between the front foam piece and the side foam piece. Once you have them all drawn on, grab your favorite tool for the job. Our favorite is a drywall saw with a double row of teeth. It's nice and sharp and takes away a good amount of styrofoam. Here Gail's pointing out that the washer and the screw head is right on one of her mortar lines instead of on the brick. Ideally, they'd all be on a brick, as they're easier to hide with stucco that way. Whenever you're carving into the styrofoam, do more than you think. Once you put the stucco on and a few layers of paint, it starts to add up and fill in those spots. Also, in a haunt setting, you want extremes. They can catch more light, make more shadows, and they're more easily noticed in a dimly lit setting. Once you have brick shapes carved and it looks like a nice new pillar, start hacking away on it to make it look like an old weathered pillar. Good places to carve away are on corners and anything really that sticks out. Imagine in the real world that a tree in the cemetery fell and a branch made a huge gouge along the front before hitting a corner and chipping it off. Then over the decades, water ran through that gouge and made it wider and wider. Again, make these marks larger than what you want the final product to look like. The stucco and paint will fill in the grooves a little bit and make them smaller. We forgot to do that here, since Gail was a little nervous carving into the 1-inch styrofoam on the top and didn't want to cut all the way through. I'd love to have her here to do a voiceover with me, but she's back in Illinois at her old haunt for Hell Week. the week before opening to help them finish up everything and be ready for opening night. Here we decided to put on accent pieces in the middle using some of our scraps. To get the nice stone texture and look to the styrofoam, the first step is to lightly burn or melt the foam with a propane torch. We really should have worn masks for this part as it puts off some bad fumes. After the project, we bought some nice half-face masks for all of our future projects and safety. Hold the torch about 6 to 10 inches away from the foam. Start farther away and bring it close until you can see the heat starting to melt the foam a little bit. Move it in random patterns and not in straight lines back and forth, as if you do that, the lines will be noticeable in the finished product. Here I mixed up rather thick stucco to fill in the washer holes in the seams between styrofoam pieces. This helps make it look like one solid piece instead of sheets of styrofoam put together. It also helps the bottom to make it look like full bricks around the corner. The stucco we got seemed to set up really fast, so I advise making it in small batches, like 1 cup or less. The stucco instructions were to mix 1 part water to 4 parts stucco. We didn't really follow this, but it was a good starting point. We made it thicker to fill the gaps and holes, and then we made it thinner when we applied it to the entire surface. This is the thinner consistency stucco Gail mixed up to apply everywhere. We used cheap chip brushes to apply it since the brushes are pretty much ruined at the end. Don't buy these from Ace as they're really expensive there. Home Depot and Lowe's have them in big packs for cheaper. I'm pretty sure Amazon have them the cheapest. When you're slopping this onto the foam, it'll get everywhere. Eye protection and an old hat are good ideas to protect your eyes and hair. Also, wear gloves when applying the stucco. If you don't, it really dries out your skin and it feels terrible. We're applying stucco everywhere as it gives a better texture and more of a stone look. It also kind of weatherproofs the structure. We'll see how these pillars stand up to the high altitude sun and the early snowstorms we get here in Colorado. After the stucco is fully dried, we applied 2 coats of dark gray exterior latex paint. Again, we use chip brushes since you have to jam the bristles of the brush and everything into the little cracks and crevices, and that's really bad for paintbrushes. Once the layer of dark gray is fully dried, we can start dry brushing. Dry brushing is a painting technique where you have a very small amount of paint on your brush and you quickly wipe it onto your subject. The quick motion and the small amount of paint on the brush just hits the high points, making them stand out more and giving depth to the piece. To get the right amount of paint on your brush, have a spare piece of cardboard or something to wipe off most of the paint before brushing it onto the piece. It's best to start on an unseen part so that you can get a little bit of practice at it and get it right. If you do really mess up on a part that you want seen, just cover it with the dark gray paint, let it dry, and start again. Installing the light is fairly straightforward if you've done any electrical work before. We started by drilling a hole through the styrofoam and plywood for the wires to be fed through. We did it before the stucco and paint so that the drilling wouldn't mess up the finish. We then secured the light with 2 long screws to the foam and into the plywood. To wire them up and still have these things portable, I used an extension cord with the end cut off to wire the light directly into that. Simple as black to black, white to white, green to ground. Wire nuts and some electrical tape. I put a knot in the cord and a wire staple to hold it in place so that if it's ever tugged on, it won't come loose. Then I drilled a hole in the back wide enough for the extension cord to pop out of. Now it can be plugged into any old extension cord that you have and moved anywhere. Here you can see close to our finished product. When doing the dry brushing technique on the bricks, you want to have very contrasting shades so that in the dark with the final lighting, they stand out from each other and makes them really pop. We removed the glass panels from the lights to frost them. This is just frosting spray paint we got from the hardware store. We frost them to help hide the LED flame in the fixture and help it make it look more like an actual torch in there. We could see the base of the light bulb, so Gail took some of the dark brown spray paint and covered the lower portion of the glass to mask it a little bit more. Since the lights are brand new, we also had to weather them and make them look a little rusted. Gail used a light brown spray paint and a brush for this. Similar to the dry brushing technique, spray the paint on a scrap piece of cardboard and then dip the brush in and apply it to the corners and where you think the rust would start at. Later, she used a paper towel and rubbed on some of the spray paint to weather them even more. Here's the fixtures in the daytime, where you can see more of her weathering and how frosted the glass is. To get the dripping effect from the base of the fixture, she mixed some latex paint with water and let it drip down. And then went over the drip with some of the brown paint to make it look like rust is running down from the light. She also put a little bit of dark green paint in some of the cracks to make them look like they're mossy and older. So these are the finished pillars in place in our front yard. They provide a pretty dim light, so we've got some LED spotlights on them at night to light them up. Gail's chicken wire form witch is right next to them, and my coffin is on the other side. We had some leftover styrofoam, so Gail quickly made some tombstones for the front yard also. Same method, but just without the stucco. She has PVC pipe on the back of them and rebar driven into the ground for them to slide over and stay in place. Thanks for watching. Here's a rough price and parts list that I put together from our receipts. Making it smaller, changing the design a little bit, or using only 1-inch foam instead of the 2-inch foam can easily get you down to under $100 per pillar. It's not cheap, but it's very enjoyable, and it's one of our favorite hobbies to build things, especially haunted house sets, props, and anything Halloween related. Again, thanks for watching, and if you have any questions on the build, leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer it. Have a happy Halloween, everybody, and keep building.